Hi, I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. This is my Chevy 2012 Colorado. And this monstrosity here has began a long trek down the road of trying to get this fuel pump to work without spraying fuel all over the place. Now I've had a long adventure here. I made some decisions early on. I didn't want to pull the fuel tank off and drop it on the floor and try and pull it out from underneath and work on it. A couple of reasons. One, if you look at this fuel line, this vent line, is attached to this, which is attached to the tank, which was attached to the frame with this little metal tag which grounds the fill port. These wires here attach to the tank also. The way to get this out is to drop the pan that holds drop the bands and the pan that holds the fuel tank on, drop it down, reach up over the top of it, and take off those clips. If you look at me, I'm about 6 foot tall. I weigh 300 pounds. I got a pretty thick chest on me. I can't fit underneath the frame. So that means I would have to jack the truck up and set it on jack stands and work on it that way by myself. Not a big fan of that. I'd rather have it sitting semi-secure, knowing that it's not going to drop on me. I don't want to get under it. I don't want to crawl around under it. I don't mind reaching my hand in there because my arm is going to fit in the place. Even if I have a flat tire, there's going to be enough room for my arm to be underneath there. But I don't put my head underneath it. I don't put my body underneath the truck. Just don't like doing it. Some of you may be happy with that. I'm glad for you. I'm not wanting to do it. So I decided to take off the truck bed, and as you can see, it's off. Wasn't easy. Had to do a whole lot of building. Making tools to do jobs has kind of been the watchword of Old Sneelock's Workshop. I work on tools, I build tools, I make tools, I use tools. And I use tools to do jobs. The job I needed was to find out why my tank was leaking, because I couldn't see. Well, when I pulled the truck bed off and tried the fuel pump, I could see fuel was spraying out of the line right at this point. And I originally thought it was cracked. My eyesight is terrible now. I had retinal surgery. That has caused some deformation in the retina in my right eye. I have cataracts in my right eye due to the retinal surgery, and my right eye is kind of messed up. My left eye is not doing too good because it's trying to work with the right eye, and it just kind of, everything's a little fuzzy. I can drive, I can see distances, I can recognize cars and people and read signs and do that kind of thing. But fine work, it's kind of a pain in the butt, especially for a guy who was a tool maker. And I like doing other things. I was an archer. I liked shooting bows and arrows at targets. And it's just been kind of a stressful situation. Well, anyways, after I got the line out where I could see it and took pictures of it and blew up the pictures so that I could get a good clear picture of the tank and the fuel line and all the other parts to it, I could see that something chewed a hole in that fuel line. So my original concern was the fuel line just cracked, because that's what it looked like in the beginning. The fuel came out in a fan, like the pipe had cracked. Well, that made me worried because this whole truck has got fuel line from the back, the evaporating container back here, all the way up to the engine. Where else was it going to crack? When when it turns out to be a rodent chewing a hole in it, it's not a failure of the hose. It's just the rodent's nature of doing business. It's going to eat anything it can eat. So, going forward, I'm looking at the truck, saying, okay, let's try this thing. We'll put a new line on it, and that should take care of the problem. So I did. I put a new line on it. It wasn't easy. It was a lot of fussing, because the idea of putting a new line on was to be able to go in there, because it has quick disconnects. Well, the quick disconnects, in my world, a quick disconnect was something that I could detach with my hand. An air hose, you pull a ring down around the end of the air hose fitting, and it slides a couple of balls loose in the collet, and the tool on the end of the air hose is just automatically disconnected. It kind of pops loose, and there you go. Quick disconnect on a impact wrench. I have an DeWalt impact wrench. You pull a collar, and the tool comes out of the front of the impact wrench. That's a quick disconnect. That's something that comes apart. It only requires itself to work. Well, these quick disconnects require a tool set. Well, not really. This tool set doesn't work. Why is that? Well, because someone who decided to use these quick disconnects on the fuel lines didn't understand that there's a space that this tool takes up. That space between this little metal canister and this wire connector is supposed to allow the tool to reach in there. Well, this tool will not fit unless you grind off the end of it. Because as you see, this doesn't look like this one. I had to take a sander and remove that part. So I got this on there, and I tried taking the hose off. They call it a line, but it's a hose. It's a plastic hose. Nylon. They like to mention nylon. Nylon's plastic. To me, plastic is plastic. And plastic has always, in my mind, said cheap. It is the least expensive way that they could get by making the part that they were making. It can have some advantages. It does have certain properties which are useful. One is it's waterproof for the general purpose of waterproof. In other words, it'll hold fluids. It is gasoline resistant. It's also alcohol resistant, because, you know, you've heard me talk many times about my love-hate affair with gasoline and alcohol. So, time goes on, and I've replaced this line by making a tool that'll fit that line there and getting the disconnect to disconnect. How did I do it? Well, you have to push in on this little white button here, and that makes the line come off. So I got the line replaced. I started the truck up. There's a hole in the back end of this elbow right there. it sprays fuel out that little crack right there in that line, and it sprays it all over the truck. Which means I can't drive it. Okay, I've replaced the fuel line after a great deal of time and effort, but replacing the fuel line doesn't fix it. This line cannot be repaired. There's a very thin metal tube that's very rusted because it's made out of cheap, mild steel. Therefore, I have to replace the entire pump. Well, we'll go into the sad story since I'm telling the whole story. When I first looked up what causes fuel leaks on Chevy Colorados, first thing everybody said was fuel pump. Fuel pumps fail on a regular basis, and they're a real pain in the butt to change. I learned about dropping the fuel tank. I learned about taking the bed off. I had a 1986 Chevy S10 that I got for my son so that he could have it as a first driver. We had a problem with the fuel system on it, so we ended up pulling the bed off the truck on that one because we couldn't get the fuel tank out from underneath the truck. See why I didn't want to do it? I have prior experience. We didn't have enough room to get the fuel tank out. When we did get it dropped, we couldn't get the lines disconnected because we couldn't reach up in there. It wouldn't drop far enough to let me get my head up in there to see what was wrong. It wouldn't let me reach my arm up in there to disconnect anything. So we took the bed off. It was a major pain in the butt on that truck too because everything was rusted. 1986, and we did it in 1995. Yeah, it was not fun. So, to make matters short, I'll cut ahead to this thing. I need to take these fittings off, this quick disconnect, for all purposes of the word, this quick disconnect, these electrical connectors, here and here. Then I have to take this lock ring loose and spin it around and take it off the top of the fuel pump, and then I should be able to lift the fuel pump up out of the tank. Now, one of the things that I was doing when I started out on this project was I said, okay, I have to go to town and get some stuff. One of the things I needed to do was fill the tank on the truck, so that was the first thing I did. And when I filled the tank on the truck, filling the tank meant that it was full. 20 gallons. Completely full. Because why fill a tank if you're only going to fill a little bit? Then I noticed the smell of gasoline, and I was at a gas station, didn't think anything about it, and said, okay, I got somebody spilled gas. I come out of the grocery store where there shouldn't be anybody spilling gas, and my truck smells strongly of gas. I check under the hood thinking I've got something spraying in under the hood, and I don't see anything. Truck starts, but it cranks quite a bit before it starts, and it kind of hesitates and bucks for the first little bit after it gets started. And I said, okay, I'm going home. So I drove home, and I got in the driveway, and I looked at the truck, and I had a spreading puddle of gasoline underneath the truck. So I immediately took everything out of the truck that I had in there and put it in the house and got away from the truck because I was concerned about it. Gasoline has a tendency to vaporize, and the vapors are explosive. And the cab is a confined space where it can have an explosion. So I opened up the doors, got everything dried out, looked at it, couldn't find anything wrong, couldn't see anything, and I went online and looked, and it said, oh, it's your fuel pump. So I looked at how do I get to the fuel pump, brought it out, drove it out, backed it into the garage here, and that's the last time the engine is run. I left the garage with the doors open and let everything dry off. Then I started working on this. One of the things I needed to do, because I knew I needed to take the truck bed off. I wasn't going to be able to do this tank. Remember, 1986 S10? So I built a hoist. Yeah, I built a hoist. I had the truck sitting outside the workshop, and I put up the tracks, I set the hoist, I built everything. That took 2 weeks. I started trying to take the truck bed off, and there are 6 mounting bolts on this truck bed. One over there, one here, 2 back there, one on the corner back there, and then there's one on the side. Same thing on the other side. So I set about taking 6 bolts off. God, what a mess. They were rusted solid, just like the top of that fuel tank. No idea how you're going to get it out, because when they built the thing, they said, oh, we'll put a cage nut inside the bed of the truck. Cage nut is a little nut that slips in there into a tiny bracket inside the truck and inside the truck bed frame. And then they fold that bracket over the top of it, weld the bracket and the nut. The nut isn't welded, but the bracket holds the nut. They weld that bracket inside the U-channel that goes across and supports the floor of the truck bed. When the floor of the truck bed is welded on, that cage nut is, for all intents and purposes, inaccessible. So I spent a lot of time, effort, and money taking those bolts out, getting the bed off, getting everything released and removed, and now I have to pull the fuel tank, or pull the fuel pump. So I'm going to have lots of fun today getting in there and taking this apart. There's a wrench that you can buy for about 20 bucks that's supposed to take this ring off. But before I do that, I want to get all the crap off the top of the tank so I don't drop anything inside the tank. I'm going to be working on explosive materials and trying to keep everything neat and clean and clear and no means of ignition. It's going to be interesting. I've got a steel ring on steel clips on a steel pump, and I'm supposed to drag one around over the top of the other. Now, steel on steel, like a file and a hard piece of metal, strikes a spark. This is not a good situation. But I got 2 choices. I can either not take it out, take it and have somebody spend, or I can spend about $1,200 to $2,500 taking this fuel pump out after I have this towed to some place where it can be worked on, or I can do it myself. I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to take as much time as I need to do a good job doing this, but this is a risky situation. I have to be absolutely paying attention. So you might not get all the shots, because I'm going to be thinking about what I'm doing here, not necessarily what you're seeing. I will try and do a commentary on it as I go along, saying what I'm going to do, and I've been pretty successful at that in the past. But the first thing I need to do is clean off this thing here and get that ready to come out. Take off all the rust and all the dust and all the dirt and all the crap, maple seeds and everything else piled up in there. To do that, I'm going to take off the electrical fittings and the hoses. I'm going to wrap the ends of the hoses with tape so that nothing can get into the hose, because while I've got it disconnected, something can crawl in there. Now, I'm thinking it's going to take, according to the book, according to people on YouTube, it takes about 2 hours. Okay, I don't know whether that's true or not. I know every time somebody says, well, that can be done in a day, I'm usually at it about 3 days, because I'm working by myself. By choice. It's my choice to work by myself. I don't want to drag somebody from a long distance, because my relatives are a considerable distance away. And I'm fully capable of doing it. Sometimes I have to make some adjustments and build some tools to build some tools. Remember the hoist? So let's get started on this and we'll get cleaned up. One of the first things I did with the truck is I pulled the negative cable off the battery. That isolates the frame of the truck. It's no longer, if something touches the frame, it's not going to complete a circuit on the battery. If I pull this one and it happens to land on that, then the truck can be live. It can have electrical current inside the frame of the truck. It can start a fire, it can cause the engine to start, it can do any kind of thing depending on what I'm doing on the truck. So I pull the negative off and I isolate it so it's not touching anything, and then that's where it stays. If you want to be careful, pull both cables, take the battery completely out. There's no source of power in the body of the truck. Just make sure you don't have two batteries. Sometimes trucks especially have two batteries. Be careful. With the bed lifted off the truck and clear, it's not touching, I can move the truck. All I have to do is put it in neutral. With the key in the ignition and the battery disconnected, the truck will not start. So I turn the key switch on the steering column to on, which lets me move the shifter, and I move the shifter to neutral. Then I can just push the truck forward. It rolls rather easily. I'm going slowly and carefully because I want to make sure that everything is safe and secure. Now I see a cable connected to the bed of the truck right over there. That's what powers the hoist. If you have any suggestions for new video, questions about today's video, or any of the other videos on the channel, just drop a note in the comments. You know I read them all. Thanks for watching.
This video is not to be viewed by anyone under the age of 13 in the U.S. or 16 in the European Union without the express written permission of the parents or the legal guardians of the underage person. Such written permission must be on file at the local government entity in charge of enforcing the rules and regulations established by the FTC. Anyone violating these terms is admitting by default that they hold harmless the owners and operators of this channel. Any and all questions should be addressed to your local branch of the FTC.